causes trauma? What are some other causes? I know trauma is huge. I mean, I'm reading a lot about trauma out there now. And they're learning that a lot of our issues is based on just that one fact, the trauma. So trauma is one. If you want to go into that more, but also maybe some other causes that you're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So trauma, I don't know if you've ever heard it talked about in this way, but we say there's big T and little t, right? There are massive traumas that, that we initially think of, like going to war or physical abuse long-term as a child. Those types of things we consider, big T, big traumas. And then there can be little traumas, things that happen that maybe weren't long-term. Prime example, shortly after I got married, I was sitting at a stoplight and the light turned green. There was a truck coming behind me and he didn't see that there was a car stopped. He just saw the green light. And so he just ran into the back of me, a huge truck. And it was one of the most frightening things I've ever experienced. And so the way that little trauma carried over, right? I wasn't injured, nothing terrible happened, like in the grand scheme of things. Like he came, the guy was like, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see you. It was my fault." He told everybody, the police when they came, so it couldn't have gone as nicely, it couldn't have gone nicer as far as an accident to happen, right? Nobody was injured. He admitted the fault. Everything else fell into place. But for the longest time, when I would come up to a red light, I would feel anxiety about stopping at the red light, right? Or I would always be checking the mirrors, checking to make sure no one was behind me. And that's just an example of like a little trauma. Eventually, even without having to go to therapy or get like really intense trauma work and treatment, I worked through it. It was okay. It eventually went away. But for a time period, my anxiety levels were escalated, particularly driving and going to a red light. That's an example of a little T trauma. But either of those can lead to feelings of anxiety and anxiousness. I love to talk about nutrition, just because it's something that I don't think we talk about enough, right? We talk about trauma a lot, but nutrition is such a huge part of our mental health. We think about diet and nutrition as really the main purpose is for us to lose weight or, get into shape or whatever it is. But there's so much more to it than that. And really, having a disrupted gut from processed foods and too much sugars, and there's just a number of things, alcohol can really disrupt our gut health. And once that's disrupted, it basically sends signals of alarm and alert to our brains, which feels like anxiety, causes anxiety. As soon as our brains feel that alarm or that panic feeling, the emotional state, then our brains start to look for the reason, right? We look for the rational reason. Why do we feel anxious? So sometimes it's really difficult to identify that it's coming from our gut because we feel it and then our brains start to look around and go, "Oh, I must be anxious because of this thing or this person or this situation," when it might actually be caused from just a disrupted gut health problem. So there's a number of ways that I think that's what makes anxiety so tricky to treat, right? So for the longest time, we've treated it as a cognitive problem, a brain problem, a thinking problem. We do have worried thoughts when we feel anxious, but that might not be where it came from. The worried thoughts might be an after effect of the other problems that are coming. So a lot of our, old treatments and still new it's still what we do today. We do a lot of cognitive behavior therapy for people who struggle with anxiety, but it doesn't work for everybody. And that's the reason, because it doesn't always come from our thoughts. It comes from other places as well.
Wow, those two areas, because I've heard a lot about trauma and I hadn't thought about the diet. That's amazing. That's another way that's not even connected to that. And so We're going to bring on eventually a guy called Doc Kruger, who deals with just what you were talking about, the diet and exercise, because it's huge. And so that's going to be a phenomenal piece to bring into the RX for Wholeness program, where it's a wholeness program. It takes in everything. And what you're, well, when I